I think the FTA brings enormous benefits, and sometimes an end consumer doesn't really understand the benefits that FTA arrangements can bring for both the countries. Now, let me give you a small little example. Number one, it definitely increases trade, and I know that Australia has gone up from $3.3 billion in 2000 to almost 17.4 billion in 2012. The second thing I'd like to also share with you is why is FTA important? Now, it was the Center of Economic Cooperation that actually said that in 20 years' time, the net increase in GDP because of the FTA arrangements, once it comes in place, can be a net increase of almost it's $32 billion for Australia, $34 billion for India. Now, that's something that you cannot look away from. Once it comes to place, there's going to be enormous benefits. Number one, increase in the base of merchandise trade that is happening. So there'll be a lot more items which will get included. Number two, there's going to be growth in obviously services trade, partially happening in terms of outsourcing, in terms of education, in terms of a few other things like tourism, but it's going to really track up and just look at the sheer numbers and the demographic advantage that India has. And thirdly, more importantly, is with the reduction of trade barriers, obviously it leads to a more smoother relationship between the two countries, which leads to what? More investment. So that definitely will help. Absolutely, because I see a lot of potential areas for the FTA. Number one, of course, new resources, because traditionally we have been only looking at coal and the traditional resources, new resources being uranium. India has a huge need for energy, and it is going to very actively look at uranium for imports, and that can be a huge benefit to Australia. Has such huge reserves of uranium. Additionally, I would say films, because the Bollywood film industry is a huge industry in India. Locations that they have been using traditionally have been very much Europe, UK, and so on and so forth. More recently, Australia. As soon as you have more Australian productions happening of those Bollywood films, all those billion people that are watching those films would want to travel to Australia and come to Australia. So I can see some non-traditional areas where these improvement. The other one is scientific research, technology, mining technology, education, not in the traditional sense of universities, but the VET sector. I see a couple of challenges. Number one, I find, and it's very much the challenges are really based on the cultural differences between doing business with Indians and Australians. So I see Australians wanting to really fast track things. I see the Indians taking a little bit more time and perhaps a lot more time to take decisions. They need to quicken their pace. So one of the challenges are really definitely the cultural pace of doing business. Number two, of course, corruption. And that has come down, no question, because a lot of Australian businesses are rather worried about going to India, mainly because they're not quite sure whether what sort of corruption platforms they might be facing. That's coming down for sure. Transparency of regulations, changes in regulatory laws, and so on, that is required definitely at India's end, as also for Australia to be a lot more open in terms of some of the items that can be brought in. For example, I'll give you a small example: mangoes. Now, mangoes, India has amazing mango production, and Australia very lately has agreed to mango imports out of a state called Uttar Pradesh. But India actually has so many different states which has an amazing variety of mangoes, which the Australians would absolutely love. But they're not allowed to come into the country. So there are some challenges which exist at both end. But overall, I think the FTA is just an amazing way to go forward, not just to build a bilateral relationship, but also the people to people relationship, I think.